All right, John, welcome to your first lesson here on this journey. And we're going to start with some kind of just basic stuff, and then we'll end up building an application here after you've done some practice. But what I want to do is start talking to you about the front end of a web application first. And a front-end web application is the stuff that you see when you go out onto the internet and you look at a page. And so we call this the user interface, or what the user sees when they go out to a page. So anytime you're making apps, you've basically gotten a kind of the brains and the information in the application that will be in the back end. And then you've got the front end, which is what we see and what it looks like. And you want to make it look really good. And you want it to be styled really good. And so we're going to start there. So this is the MDN Web Docs, which is Mozilla Developer Network, and you're probably familiar with Mozilla as a engine, right? An internet engine or an internet browser. So this is really good here. So this reference guide, references and guides, it's got a lot of tutorials and things that you can kind of play around with on your own, and you can kind of read about. And we're going to start with the HTML stuff here. And so what I would like you to do is basically practice the code that I'm about to show you, and then you can read through this introduction to HTML, and you can go through all of this stuff here, right? All of these links and all of this information you can kind of read through if you're somebody who likes to read. If you're not the type of person that really likes to read documentation, then you can just continue to practice the kind of projects that I give you, and then I'll show you how to start searching for other projects that you can work on. So I asked you to create a CodePen account. CodePen is going to be an online sandbox for us to just play around with code. It's also going to be really easy because every time you make a pen, so you're going to create an account, and hopefully you can do that. If not, I can talk you through it. But once you create an account and you make a pen would be a project. You can basically share this link with me, and I can look at your code and kind of help you out if you get stuck. And I can share things with you as well. I've got tons of different sample projects on here that you can look at. And so I'm going to click on Pen. And really the first three tools that I'm going to teach you, I call them tools because they're not really languages. HTML, I guess, is a language. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's basically that every piece of text that you put into a web browser has to have a home. It has to have some label attached to it. The CSS, this is going to be a lot of fun. The CSS, or the Cascading Style Sheet, is what gives the page its look, right, with all the colors and the layout and the different ways that you can kind of just get your page to view really good. And then the JavaScript, the JS here, the JavaScript, this will be our first real scripting language, your first programming language that you'll learn, is the brains or the engine that's going to drive the code. So when the user makes a decision to interact with a page, the JavaScript is what's doing the work. All right, so we're going to think of the HTML as the bones, the CSS is kind of the skin, it's what looks good, and then the JS is going to be the brains of the operation. And you can kind of click these and move them. So for now, I'm just going to move these, and we are going to play in the HTML. So I can type in HTML and hit my tab key, and that's going to make my first tag. We call this a tag here. And I really encourage you to learn the shortcuts so that you don't have to worry about these little opening braces. And basically, you can see this is married with this closing tag here. Okay, so again, HTML, and that's going to be our outer layer, and then we have a body. So I'm going to do body tab. And then what I like to do from here is basically start my code. So you can kind of read about all this here in the intro to HTML. It sort of will go through the structure. And let's see here. Let's look at text fundamentals. It's kind of showing you different ways you can display text. I want to see the HTML layout. If I can. Let's go to getting started. See if it shows. Okay, they don't really show the general layout of the HTML page, but I'll kind of show you that here. All right, your outermost is your HTML, then your body, and then we can start our work. So I'm going to make a div, which stands for division. And inside of that div, we can put an H1, which is a big block of text, and like my logo or whatever. And now you're going to start to see content populate. This kind of simulates what our page would look like down here. Okay, and so we can throw like a logo in there. Maybe if you throw an H2, it's going to be a little smaller subheading, and you can kind of play around with the text that you'd want to throw in here and make it a little bit different if you would like. And you can do things like, you can go all the way down to an H6. So do H6 tab, small set of text. And so you can kind of see that it has these generic styling principles that the browser is going to read when it sees these elements or these tags, and it knows to apply that type of styling to this text. All right, here's a paragraph. We can do P. There's a paragraph of text, and you can see that it's sort of just kind of a plain Jane font, and it doesn't have any sort of bold or strong looking text to it. It's just kind of sitting there. Then we can make an unordered list with list items. So let's say I'm making a to-do list here, so I'm going to go above it and put in an H3. My to-do list. And this might be groceries. I can throw another list item in here, get gas, and do laundry. And you can see that it's just kind of applies some different styling there to your HTML. Now, super secret developer tool here. It's really cool. When you do these types of things, we can actually take a look at our code. We can inspect it. We can see kind of what it looks like. And I can do that by right-clicking. Like if I want to right-click over my logo and inspect. Now the developer tools pop up, and I recommend that you use Google Chrome, which is what I'm using in these videos. But we can see our page here. And ignore all this noise, because this noise is all CodePen. And we're going to, get rid of this when we move out of CodePen and pretend that's not here. We just want to focus on this section. But here's the code that we've written, and you can see this code is actually on the page. So when I click on H1, here it has these generic styles applied to it. Right? It's got a font size, it's got a font weight of bold. You can go down to the paragraph here, we can click on it, and you can see the styling, applied to that is a little bit different. Look at our unordered list. It's going to make a list style of disk, which is what we're seeing on each of these list items. And we've got some code over here that's the basic default browser styles that we apply to this. Now, most of that looks kind of ugly, and that's why we're going to use our own CSS to play around and change these types of things. Okay, so if I kind of hover over these elements here in my DevTools, I can see that my H1 kind of spans the whole way across the page there. And I get that color, which represents the margin. So it's got this margin of 21.4 attached to it, above and below. So it's got a little bit of spacing before the next subheading. You can see how these kind of push away from each other. And so that's just something that we can kind of test as we go, and we're going to fine-tune when we start to apply our own styles. And so you're basically making a web page right off the bat here just by throwing some code into the body div that we have here. All right? Let's make another list. Let's call this an ordered list. This is going to be an OL. And so you can also do this. If I did the same thing with an OL, it would number it. buy groceries, get gas, and do laundry. And in this case, it knows because it's a ordered list with that OL tag, right? So that code block, the browser knows to number those list items. Versus the unordered list, which is a UL, it knows to put those disks there. So you can see the difference in your list items. And you can separate this out even better. Like instead of having one big div here, I'm going to start talking about how to kind of organize this code a little bit better. But you can go ahead and just kind of play around with different elements that you see here and different tags and kind of read through getting started. And what you don't want to do is just throw text in that is not what we call semantically marked up. All right, you want to put that between two tags, an opening and a closing tag. And so that kind of just goes through the whole thing. And you can even practice on here, right? So you can try this and you can see the answer into how that would be built. All right, so lots of cool stuff here to look at. So that's just a quick little basic, and you can play around and see if you can create like an about me page, about John, and just throw some things in there, some text, semantically mark it up with different tags, and then what we can do is we can start to apply styles to it. So we can do that with our next activity. But for now, you're just kind of throwing some code on there and see if you can get it to render on your page.